Good evening. Coming up tonight on the Free Thought Forum, American Atheist holds their annual convention in Salt Lake City. Greta Christina releases a new book to help atheists come out of the closet, and a new PBS documentary gets you acquainted with your inner fish. All that and more coming right up. Roll the credits, please. And welcome back. This is the Free Thought Forum presented by the Pennsylvania Nonbelievers. I'm your host for tonight, Jacob, and once again I'm alongside Doug. Hello, Doug.
Greetings, everyone.
So we got a bit to talk about tonight, but I'd like to start off by reiterating a point I made last episode, but I wanted to really bring an emphasis to it, and that is the Secular FM donation to the PA Nonbelievers this month. I've talked about Secular FM a few times on this program, but I'm really a big supporter of the network. It is the first of its kind 24/7 secular broadcasting company on the internet. And if you can go to www.secular.fm, at any point you can find secular programming dealing with a variety of atheist topics, from counter-apologetics to deconversion stories. So if you want to check them out at Secular FM, they do rely on the patronage of their viewers to support the program, but they donate 25% of their monthly patronage to a new secular nonprofit, and they've selected for this month our organization, the PA Nonbelievers, and we really want to say a big thank you to them and should show our support for them. In other news, we have a couple meetings and tables coming up. Our first is in Valley Fest in Annville on the 26th. That's this weekend. The other one is in Lebanon Craft Fair on the 3rd of May. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of details about that one yet. Be sure to be checking your email inbox if you're a member of the organization to get the latest as far as meetup point or the time of the event. One event we definitely have a confirmation for is Old York Street Fair in York on the 11th, which is Mother's Day. And we have a whole bunch of events planned for around the Mid-State this year. We have the Annville Memorial Day Parade on the 24th. And on our Memorial Day parades, we love to bring attention to the atheists and foxholes, something that is often insisted don't exist. But absolutely they do. We have a few veterans in our own organization.
And it doesn't necessarily, a foxhole does not have to be during a war. There's plenty, there's plenty of foxholes out there. When people think that they're going to die, then they may as well be in a foxhole, and plenty of them don't turn to Jesus.
Right. But as far as some other just to give you the taste of some of the other events we do throughout the summer. We have Lancaster Pride Fest in June, as well as Jubilee Day in Mechanicsburg, as well as a few other events we don't have confirmation for yet. But we definitely have a pretty solid lineup for this summer so far. So if you want to just check our website out at panonbelievers.org, you can keep up to date on all the different events we have going on. Now, as far as our main topics for the night, first we're going to talk about the American Atheist Convention in Salt Lake City. And I think this is I really commend American Atheists for their choice of venues, really going into the heart of Mormon country to hold an atheist convention and really show the Mormons, really challenge the Mormons and show support for the atheist in Mormon families. I didn't get a chance to really see too much of the actual event over the last weekend. They do have a live stream for purchase on their website. I do intend to do that. Unfortunately, I just didn't have the time to look at it over this weekend. Hopefully, I'll have more to talk about it on our next show. But I think one of the bigger stories to come out of this was preceding the actual event was David Silverman and the rest of American Atheists helped organize a mass resignation from the Mormon Church. And you may be wondering, well, what's the big deal? If you don't know too much about Mormonism, you might not know why it's so important, like resigning from a church would be such a big deal. But actually in Mormonism, it is quite a big deal. There are people who have actually had to resort to legal action to get the Mormons to leave them alone, essentially, to get them off their list. And when you're on their list, they'll actually send people out to your house to see what you're doing. And you can be constantly harassed by the Mormon Church until oftentimes it takes legal action and significant personal risk to leave the Mormon Church. It's definitely one of the hardest religions to leave. I won't say it is the hardest, but it's definitely up there.
Well, you don't want to be harassed all the time after you leave. I mean, you make your decision, and now all of a sudden someone comes along and says, "No, you've got to reconsider." Then you've got to, keep on coming back and hounding you to reconsider and come back in the church. And of course, there is a monetary motive there too, because the Mormons do like you to give substantially to the Mormon Church. They like that old 10% of your income as donations. So they don't want to lose any more people than they absolutely have to.
Right. I mean, I don't think it's quite as bad as, say, the Jehovah's Witnesses, where your family is actually required to shun you. Although that doesn't mean that shunning doesn't go on in the Mormon Church. It most certainly does. In fact, I've heard at one point the majority of the homeless in Salt Lake City were either atheist or even homosexual teenagers of Mormon families. So you can face some serious ostracism in these organizations. But that's why it's important that we really show our support for the atheists living in that kind of circumstance. And I think it's one thing for American Atheists just to hold a conference, but what I've really liked about it is how they really went out there to make a difference in that organization for the atheists in that organization.
Could I just say one thing, Jim? Would you mind just switching off the earpiece there? It's a little distracting. I'm hearing your conversations in the background with us. Thanks, Jim.
Okay. Always have to clean up some things. Yeah, I was hearing that too. Well, you never know if it's just the voices in your head, though.
Yeah.
But on this, as I was saying, they were really there to show their support for the atheists, and that kind of segues into another probably also large event, so to speak, or news. Looks like we have a call. Caller, you're on the air.
Hello, caller?
Hi, this is Pam, and I just wanted to talk to you all a second about the Atheist Convention out in Salt Lake City. We just got back.
Oh, lucky you. Lucky you.
Oh, it was. Salt Lake City is absolutely beautiful, aside from the fact the convention was wonderful. It's a nice place to go on a trip.
Mm-hmm.
But what I wanted to talk to you about is the night before the convention started, there was a debate between two atheists, one of which was Dave Silverman, president of American Atheist, and two Mormons. And the two Mormons were both professors at Brigham Young. And it was really interesting because they were, obviously very intelligent people who were used to sort of having to defend Mormonism. but they can't even hear how odd it sounds to the rest of us, you know? Like, Jacob, you were talking about how children are shunned or thrown out of their family. Well, they got really defensive about that and said it doesn't really happen very much, and it's not the sort of thing a real Mormon would do. A former Mormon woman was sitting, we call them foremen, I understand.
Yeah.
But anyway, a foreman woman was sitting next to me, and she just got angrier and angrier. You know, the more they talked, the more she was, she was going, oh, no, that's not true. No. And finally she apologized, and I said to her, oh, I don't mind at all. you keep on doing it.
Yes, almost music to your ears.
Yes, it was. But one thing that was particularly interesting, the moderator of the panel was also a Mormon professor, not at BYU. He's at the University of Utah. And he starts off with a joke. And his joke is, you atheists don't believe in miracles. Well, I've got a miracle for you. These two Brigham Young professors had to get permission from the religious powers that be to be here tonight. And the joke is, they got it, so it's a miracle. And everybody laughs, but think about this. These two professors are guys like in their 40s.
Yeah.
They're PhDs. They've written books, and they almost certainly have tenure. Given their age and the fact that they have PhDs and they've written books. But they didn't seem to think it was odd that they couldn't come on a panel expressing their own views, not representing the church officially, not representing Brigham Young officially, without getting permission. I just thought that was extraordinary.
That is funny, but pathetically so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just sort of sad.
Yeah.
And that when we took a tour of the Mormon temple, and some very lovely young Mormon missionary women took us around, and we took a tour of another, the house where Brigham Young lived. And again, could not have been nicer. Lovely people, warm, friendly, helpful, and all like that. But boy,
I think that's a point where the Mormons are not. Maybe we portray Mormons in a bit of a bad light here, but they're not horrible people.
Oh no, not at all. No, they really, and just about everybody we ran into in Salt Lake City couldn't have been nicer. I mean, just real pleasant. But there's just this wall. It's like they're so surrounded by people who think like them that they don't even see it anymore.
Right. And that's what's so frightening about it, really.
Really. Well, the other interesting thing we learned is actually, state of Utah is only 62% Mormon, but 80% of the legislators
right.
are Mormon. And of course that makes all the difference because they make the rules.
It's just very slightly, yeah.
Yeah. Well, next year the Atheist Convention is in Memphis, which is much easier for all of us to get to. So maybe some more people can come.
Yeah, I definitely hope. I'm glad you mentioned that. I meant to bring that up, but yeah, I hope to have a few vacation days to get down there next year.
Yeah, it's always a good time.
Yeah, that's Memphis, Pennsylvania.
No.
Yeah, it's about a day and a half.
If only.
Depending on how fast you drive.
Yeah.
Okay, well, have a good show, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for calling, Pam.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yes. Yeah, I know we have a few from our organization who actually did get a chance to go. Pam was one. I think Brian was another one. He was there over the weekend, although I'm sure he's trying to get caught up on some stuff since he got back. But it'd be fun to see him if we get him to call in for once. But
yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing about the Mormons is while their beliefs are crazy and they're required to do some things that we would find, immoral, they're really not that. They're not. It's not like they're stupid or evil people. They can be actually very nice and intelligent people. They just have these crazy beliefs that force them to do some bad things, and I think it's I often bring up Mormonism up in discussions because it's like it's a great example of what a con man can get people to do. Yes. It's because David Fitzgerald put out a book on the Mormons. And in the opening section, he says, if we got together all the crazy cults, and they had a competition to find out who was the most well-documented pile of baloney there is, who would win. And he said, well, I'm here to make a case for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he went point by point, all these things that you wonder how this religion actually got to be as successful as it is. And it's just what people are ready to believe.
Well, when you tell people what they want to hear, then it's not hard to get converts.
Right. But
You know, for what it's worth, the Mormons came to my house, well, not my house, my family's house, for about a year, you know, like once a week, trying to convert my mother. And you know, my mother was kind of a person that really couldn't say no. You know, she was nice and polite and everything. And usually my father was not home until one day he was home when they were there, and he just came in and said, "What the bloody hell are these people doing here?" And he said, let them take their Bibles the hell out of here, you know. And that was the end of the Mormons. But I would say they were very, very nice people, and as Jacob said, they were great salespeople. But it also taught me a lot, even though I was still an atheist at that time. Hearing the arguments just helped cement my own views.
Right. Moving on to the next topic, one of the bigger things that happened, other than the American Atheist Convention, of course, was Greta Christina released a new book called Coming Out Atheist. It was a book specifically designed to help atheists come out of the closet. And it's actually received quite a bit of press. There have been it's made a lot of noise around the atheist movement. A lot of the bigger bloggers like Richard Carrier, Hemant Mehta, J.T. Everhart have all released very positive reviews of this book. And it's actually was even featured in an article by the Washington Post.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so it
was a favorable review, I take it.
Yeah, it seemed a pretty favorable review too. And I mean, even Greta Christina was pretty floored by that fact.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually picked up a Kindle version of the book last Wednesday. It's available in all formats, and it's a brilliantly written book. It's probably going to be the go-to resource for atheists to come out for years to come. She did about, I think, 3 or 4 years of research to put this book together, trying to get as many coming out stories as she could, and kind of get a feel of what worked, what didn't work, in all the different scenarios. Now, the book itself is actually divided into 3 different sections. The first is why you should come out. The second is how we should come out. And the third is how we can all help others to do so. Now, of course, why we should come out is there's a lot of pretty obvious reasons for that. It's really helped atheists gain acceptance throughout the country. Well, either throughout the country or just even in your hometown. You might live in a very religious section where people have never seen an atheist in their life.
Well, they actually have, but they just don't know it.
Well, they don't know it, and they have all these misconceptions about them.
Mm-hmm.
And I like one of the points she's continually brought up throughout the book, which is if you don't come out, there's always a chance you'll get outed anyway, so it's sometimes better to do it on your own time, like do it as you plan to do. And I can attest to that. Like, there would have been a few times before I came out that I could have easily been outed, and it could have been during like a family tragedy or a really, really rough point where you don't need to deal with that and coming out at the same time. So she goes into that a bit. And I think there's also the point I agree most with her about was when she talks about do it for yourself, above anybody, do it for yourself. You know, because you might be put in a situation over and over again where you have to lie about it. And that can really start to wear on you after a while. You know, if somebody asks you if you believe in God and you have to, you know, scramble to make something up, or, you know, try to cover your tracks and try not to say too much.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily want your very religious employer to find out, you know, like that.
Yeah. And really, I realized I had to do it whenever I decided to really become an activist in the movement, because I wanted them. I really, out of respect for my parents, you know, I wanted them to hear it from my own lips. You know, I didn't want them just finding out about it from somebody else. I wanted them to know it, hear it from me personally. But then the heart of the book is really how to come out, and she really approaches it from all kinds of different angles. Like they talk about, you know, how to come out to your friends, how to come out at work, how, you know, all these different things. Far and away the longest chapter in the book is how to come out to family members, because of course that's really the hardest part of, I would say, is the hardest one to do. And I mean, she even puts a subsection just for talking to the parents, because, you know, most other relationships can be replaced. That one really can't be.
Yeah.
So, and she really gives a lot of really sound advice, such as, you know, it can sometimes be a process, like they might actually be in denial of it at first, which some people have actually come across, with they've had to come out several times in order.
People didn't believe it necessarily.
Yeah, believe it, or the worst we get sometimes is people thinking you're just going through a phase.
Oh, yes.
And I think if there's one thing I did right when I came out to my parents, was made it very, very clear that this is something I've struggled with for 15 years. And it's absolutely not a phase. And also she also did a good job of talking about the difference between, say, just coming out and being out. You know, it's possible, like, there are times I'll just, you know, be open about it at work. You know, I won't, you know, get anybody's face about it, but if religion comes up in casual conversation, I'm not going to lie or shy away from the conversation. I mean, I'm not going to, I don't treat anybody with any disrespect, but
isn't it also a question of how adamant you are about the thing? If you do it combatively, then obviously you're going to get a combative attitude back. But I think if you come out more of a matter of fact, oh yeah, you know, I'm an atheist. Now I don't really believe. Then they're not going to jump on your back. But then again, you've also got to let them know. You've got to convey the point that you really are serious about this. It isn't just a phase that you're going through, that you really don't believe, and you're comfortable with the fact that that you don't believe.
Right. And actually that's a point she makes time and time again, is, you know, there are a lot of different ways to do this, and one thing she says at the beginning of the book is, it's not like here's your roadmap, do this, 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 and this, and it'll all work out great. That's why it's great that she approaches it from all different angles, so that you can kind of look through and say, oh, maybe this would work for me, and maybe modify it for my own use. But I mean, she definitely is good about acknowledging that everybody's situation is different. But the idea behind this book is to provide enough materials that you can get an idea of how you want to go about it. And actually, some things that a lot of people have said in her research when she was soliciting stories from other people is sometimes they did regret how combative they were at first. And, you know, even we can sympathize, though, because, you know, if you're forced to keep quiet about it for so long, and then now you feel like you can talk about it, you feel like the dam has burst.
Out of
yeah, you just want to burst out. You just want to, you know, shout it from the rooftop. But you know, I'm realized, you know, have to hold yourself in a few times.
Yeah, it's almost like you're yelling, "Hallelujah! I don't believe."
yeah, something to that degree. So I mean, that's and really that's the kind of array of things that she talks about.
Can you realize the amount of research that she must have done to write a book like that? Because, like you say, no two people are really the same. So she must have done an awful lot of research.
Right. And I mean, I just kind of scratched the surface when I was trying to research it myself. But I think, you know, she actually did, you know, go like put together blogs, put together places to try to collect this, and she also cites quite a few other. There was other material sort of like this already published, but this was trying to really bring a lot more of it together. And it is definitely well researched. I think she, as I said a couple times already, I think she did spend about 3 years doing research for this particular project.
There's been a lot of books written about what atheists are and what atheism is, what non-belief is, what agnosticism is, and the whole ream there, but no one ever really, that I can recall, has really written a serious book on how to tell in words what you believe.
There's really, and that's why I was really excited about this book when I learned about it, because it was like just to have this one source to go, one go-to source for this question. And there have been 2 books that have touched on this subject, but not quite in detail. The first one was The Young Atheist Survival Guide by Hemant Mehta, and the other was called, I think it's called, by Dale McGowan, called Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist. So, I mean, these were, as far as I can tell, they were more focusing on helping younger people, but this is really a book for everybody. And like I said, you know, there's 3 different sections, whether you're an out atheist, whether you're a closeted atheist. I think there's something for everybody in this book, whether you're a deeply closeted or even if you're just a lifelong atheist who doesn't understand what the big deal is. I think this will give you an understanding of why it's a big deal to some people. You know, or if you were just in a very liberal Christian environment where it's not a big deal, you could understand, say, somebody who is closeted in a Jehovah's Witness family who is going to face some serious problems when they go through with this.
But do you realize actually how many people that must be out there that are nearly atheists, almost atheists? They're to the point where they're starting to ask questions right now, but they're afraid to ask questions of religious people. You know, they're not going to go to their priest and say, well, look, this story in the Bible doesn't really seem to make much sense to me, because it's almost like they're embarrassed about it. So where do these people go? It's almost like you're smoking in the boys' room, you know?
Right, and that's one of the things that's brought up a couple of times. They call it the snowball effect. You know, you get a few people coming out, and then you can find they realize, oh, maybe that's I share that view, or you know, there are some people who've been. The church does have a tendency to really grossly misrepresent what atheists are. So you can be the example of what atheists actually are. You know, I know growing up, there was a couple times that it was implied that, you know, atheists know there's a God, they just pretend it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all these negative stereotypes. And if it's one thing that we can learn from, say, the LGBT movement, is just being out there to dispel the stereotypes can go a very long way. And there were a lot of people when talking about the book, she was saying that in all her research for the book, only one person actually regretted coming out. You know, even people who have suffered heavy consequences have not regretted it. About their only regrets maybe they feel like they went about it the wrong way.
Yeah. Well, there have been times in my life where, you know, people have got around me have got into a protracted discussion about religion or God or Jesus or prayer, and I've just kept my mouth shut. You know, it's like I don't want to get in on this discussion, because I'm now going to be immediately on the defensive, because it appears like everyone else here is on the religious side. They may not be, but I said, okay, just don't say anything and it will pass.
I would have to say, though, there was a time in my life where I knew I didn't believe it anymore, but I'd still defend it.
Yeah.
And if anybody seriously challenged me at that point, I would have probably been an atheist long ago.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I felt like there was this obligation, this, you know, I was programmed from a young age to think this way, where if somebody would have just rendered a serious challenge, I would have probably come to my senses a lot sooner.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think it's really important to be out. I mean, I can definitely say that, you know, since I've really become an out atheist, I've never been more comfortable with who I am. And,
yeah.
You know, it's like I have nothing to hide about myself. It's out. You know, I don't care what other people say about it. I'll engage if they want to, but, you know, I'm not going to shy away from it anymore.
Well, I know it may sound a little egotistical, maybe it is, but I really think at times I'm a better Christian, as it were, than a lot of Christians. I act more like they say that a Christian should act. Be nice to other people, be forgiving, and everything. But of course, you know, they seldom are. But, you know, random acts of kindness, I believe that although I don't perform random acts of kindness for any sort of reward or return on my investment, so to speak, I always find it very comfortable and pleasing to myself to do little nice things. You know, you can see there's a line of traffic, you know, a mile long, and this person there is just trying to get out into traffic, and you go, well, okay, heck, I'll stop, so I'll be, you know, 20 feet further back, like that, and then just
right.
Come on.
Right, and it's that goes back to just working to dispel the stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
It's if there's one thing you can do to make a big contribution to secularism in this country, is just dispel the negative stereotype. Because I remember growing up in church, you know, secularism was such a dirty word. Like, it literally was. And so that's why for any of us who have grown up in heavily religious environments, this is definitely something very personal to us, and it definitely feels like a cause worth fighting for. But the last section of the book is also how we can help other people to do it. You know, how to get them information, give them encouragement, how to, you know, kind of pull them along, but don't try to push them into it. That's something they're not comfortable with.
But you have to let them know that they're not alone.
Right.
Yeah, they've got a lot of company.
Right. But again, I think this is a beautifully written book. I would encourage this to everybody, especially if you know anybody who's still closeted. It would be a great read for them. And it's actually available in all formats. Kindle, audiobook, and hardcover.
Oh, even audiobook, huh?
What's that?
Even audiobooks?
Yes, I do believe it is an audiobook too. It's available on all formats.
Yeah. That's nice. When I used to do a ton of traveling, a ton of driving and everything, I used to love audiobooks.
Right.
You know, and I mean, you don't want to drive while reading like that, but you could plug in either a CD or a tape and just drive down the road and listen to a whole book.
Right. Yeah, and especially if it's by a good speaker. I haven't really listened to Greta Christina too much, or actually I don't even. I'm pretty sure she narrated it, but I'm not completely sure. But yeah, there are definitely some authors I'd actually rather get their audiobook for, because they're very good speakers. But moving on to the next topic. Doug and I have one of our favorite topics over the last couple of weeks has been the show Cosmos, where we both love science. But there's actually another PBS, another mini-series on PBS called Your Inner Fish. Rather interesting title. It's actually based on a 2009 book. And what this is really talking about the subject of comparative anatomy, which is one of the strongest pieces of evolution. Comparative anatomy.
Okay.
Which is one of the strongest pieces of evidence for evolution that there is. It's some of the early anatomists really, like, as they were starting to look through different animals, they couldn't help but notice a particular pattern occurring, and that is pretty much every animal had their arms where the pattern of you had a single bone, 2 bones in the forearm, and then you had a cluster down at the end of the arm. And the closer related animals were, the more similar the cluster would be, to the point where you could actually see all the same bones, that some of them were just stretched or maybe bent in a different way or fused together, but they were all still pretty much the same bones. And that's one of the bigger creationist arguments to say, well, there's nothing new here. But evolution doesn't actually require there to be anything new. It just requires a change over time.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm reminded of a story where when they first started finding dinosaur fossils, some of the creationists at the time were pretty uneasy by how bird-like some of them were. And so what this series is doing, it's actually a series in 3 parts. The first part is called Your Inner Fish. The second part is Your Inner Reptile, and the third part is Your Inner. Let me see if Your Inner Monkey.
Now that it raises the hairs on the back of some creationist necks.
Right.
I'm not related to a monkey.
But but yeah, so it really talks about how we look at, you know, how anatomy really shows how things can relate back to fish. And I know Richard Dawkins has brought this up a couple times in his book, and they touch on this a little bit. And that is, some of the nerves and internal organs in our body only make sense if you realize that things started out as fish. because there are times that nerves kind of take the long way around to between parts of our bodies, which really makes sense if you realize that things were at a different orientation, things were in different locations in our ancestry, and the nerve doesn't have a chance to just redo itself and start from scratch. You know, it can only move around where it used to be.
Yeah, and this is over long periods of time. When we start talking about evolution, we're not talking about something that has changed in the last 100 years or even the last 1,000 years. It's in the last million or so years.
Right. And if you realize the time scales and how, you know, just little incremental movements of each of the internal parts can produce massive changes. And one of the things that part of the story was looking for the transitional fossils for some of the first land creatures. And what they were looking for was some sort of primitive foot or some sort of primitive hand. And they actually, looking at maps and of different, like one of the things that one of the hardest parts of paleontology is really just knowing where to look for fossils. You know, you can't just dig down anywhere and expect to find something.
Well, I mean, you have to remember that fossilization only occurs in 1/10 of 1% of everything that dies. So they say, well, we haven't found fossil evidence of it. How can you say that there was a, you know, something with a foot like that? It doesn't mean that it's not there. We just haven't gone to the right place where this thing, animal, died and became fossilized. But over a period of time, hey, sooner or later we'd...
And a lot of times they've worked out, okay, we have this fossil here and this fossil here. We think there's a transition with them, so we're going to look here in a layer of strata halfway in between where we found the other two. And a lot of times they'll find it. Not always, though, but a lot of times they can, just by knowing the pattern of their migration, they can look at a map and see, okay, it's probably going to be there if we can find it.
And they can know the strata of the land, what it takes to fossilize the remains of something. So that's where they're going to look.
Right. Like in this one, they were looking for, like I said, what could possibly be the first land fish. And I think it was somewhere in northern Canada they actually went to, where there was a lot of exposed strata. And after at least one summer of searching, they found a fossilized fish bed. So they thought, okay, this is going to be a good place to look. And then after, I think they spent 2 more summers looking there before they finally found a fossilized fish that had a fin that was a primitive hand, had all the bones of a primitive hand, but it was still a fin, and the fish was also flat-headed, which is important because when a what the flathead allows it to do is kind of just swim up to the surface. It can poke its nostrils out and breathe air and look above the surface without actually leaving the water.
Well, if you look at the wings of the pterodactyl fossils, I mean, you look at the leading edge of their wings, and basically their arms. They've got all the same bones.
Yeah, you can actually see the fingers pulling out. And actually the end of the wing chamber is an elongated pinky if you look at it.
Yes.
Which is actually one of the ways they can actually tell that that birds came from dinosaurs and not pterodactyls. Because while the pterodactyl bone goes like this, a lot of dinosaur arms would go like this, but what we find in birds is their wing chambers is all those same bones just fused together.
And look at the bat.
Yeah, the bat
modern day bat. I mean,
a bat is essentially a webbed hand almost. And that's one of that's how, that's a lot of what we talk about in comparative anatomy, is looking at all the same bones, all the same orientations, yet you get such a high diversity just from those same bones. And like I said, it was just recently they started finding these sort of walking fish that have all the bones in place to be able to walk up on the shore, but they're still very, very fish-like.
But it expands your mind to think of the possibilities like that and say, when are they going to discover it? All the breadcrumbs are there all the way around it, and all we got to do is just find that.
Yeah, and it's important to note that the first person to label humans as primates was actually a creationist. He believed in kinds of animals, and unlike today's creationists, he was actually looking for a way to objectively determine what animals were different kinds, which you'll never get a creationist to do these days, because whenever he started grouping together what a primate should be, like we already have a good idea of what the primates are, and he started looking at all the traits they had in common to spell out a definition of a primate. And then he got really, really frustrated when he realized he was also describing a human being. All these, body-wide hair follicles, all the different pieces of a primate are in human beings. And eventually he just gave up and said, I can't figure out the difference. I can't find an objective criteria to say that humans aren't primates. And I think Your Inner Monkey is going to be shown this coming Sunday on PBS. On PBS, and that's going to be. I definitely look forward to hopefully seeing that, and because that's, I think, where it's really, really going to become evident that humans are primates.
Well, it'll become evident to the people that have an open mind,
right.
But for the strict religionist, no amount of proof will suffice.
But yeah, I mean, we can even see this kind of thing in reptiles, where it's not, we're not quite up to the point of, say, mammals and primates, but you can see the development there. The development in the brain, certain sections of the brain starting to develop, certain, the different pieces of the spine, all kinds of different pieces that are starting to show up. And actually, one of the most solid pieces of evidence is in the embryology, which is what they also talk about, the development of embryos, where the initial development is very, very similar between humans. A human embryo and a fish embryo are very similar. They all have gill slits, they have tails. The embryos are very similar. Now, I'm going to have a little disclaimer here that you have to be very careful when you're looking at embryo data, because unfortunately, one of the first persons to work on embryos was named Haeckel, who embellished a few of his early drawings of embryos to try to say that all stages of the embryological development were identical and identically retraced evolutionary development. That is actually not true, and I'm just putting this out there that people be careful, because this is one thing that creationists try to keep arguing, is just because he frauded it they want to say that all the embryological data is a fraud, which isn't true either.
Yeah.
But it's still important. It's still pretty good evidence to show that all of the basic elements are still there, like the yolk sac, the gills, the tail, all of that is very similar and pretty well retraces it, although not as exactly as Haeckel was hoping for.
best laid plans. You know, one thing I would just like to add this time, looking back a little bit, our first broadcast of this show, the Free Thought Forum, was on the 22nd of August, which was a Tuesday, of the year 2000. So now, at that particular time, we invited Jesus to appear on our show, the Free Thought Forum, and you know, be a guest, discuss why we should believe in him, why we should love him, or just give his opinions on world views. Well, today is Tuesday, the 22nd of April, and it's been 4,991 days since we gave that standing invitation. But still, there's no Jesus. Jesus has not shown up to give us his point of view. So if you're real Jesus and you're listening, showing up, knock on the door, and we'll let you in. But I mean, don't let it get to over 5,000 days when you're not responding. Yeah. So, you know, that was it. Just keep it in. Yeah. We've been on the air since August of 2000, so it doesn't look like we're going to go anyplace soon. So you say you've never seen an atheist? Well, yeah. You're looking at them now. Yeah.
Well, you know, and that brings up another question. What was it that Paul did that was so special that he got a personal visit? Or what's that?
Say that again.
What was it that the Apostle Paul did that was so special that he got to have a personal visit from Jesus? And why can't we get one too?
I know it. I mean, we'd be polite to him as we are, you know, with any religious or non-religious guest. Of course, we'll maybe ask him pointed questions, but we only somewhat disrespectful to hecklers or to people that they want to proselytize and they don't want to listen to anything and they just want to point a finger like that. But yes, we'd love to have
on the subject of his return. I guess it wouldn't be a complete year without having yet another end of the world prediction. You know, I thought you know, in 2012 we had enough to last us for a while, but apparently not. Apparently a lot of people think that the series of lunar eclipses is a sign of the end times. Because there's a prophecy apparently that says that in the last days the moon will turn blood red. Yeah. Which, for those of you who are scientifically literate, you know that's what happens during a lunar eclipse, mostly because the sunlight refracts off our atmosphere, and the red wavelengths are what gets reflected by the moon. You know, the light reflecting off of our atmosphere like a prism, that is.
So it's not a red moon.
And what's that?
I said it's not a red moon. That
well, it is a red moon, but there's a natural explanation for it. Yeah. It's just, you know, light, just the way the light catches the moon now. But it should be noted that actually in early pagan literature, they were definitely afraid of lunar eclipses.
Oh, yeah.
Like they would make all kinds of noise on the night of a lunar eclipse to try to scare away spirits. And of course, the more educated in the group, and the educated elites were wondering what was wrong with them. And of course, the superstitious people were angry at the educated people.
And for a while, people that could predict it had great power. They say, you know, I can block out the moon, or I can block out the sun. And that's an awesome prediction.
Right. But, and of course, there's now an end-of-the-world cult trying to say that this series of lunar eclipses we're going through is somehow a sign. And actually, Christian evangelist Ray Comfort is kind of hopping on this bandwagon too, and he's saying that there's also another prophecy that in the last days nations will be warring against each other and there will be famine somewhere in the world. I'd like to know what time in human history that hasn't occurred.
Yes. It isn't an everyday common occurrence.
Yes.
Yeah.
There is always famine, there's always war, and there is always lunar eclipses. I mean, actually somebody brought this up. I mean, where were these arguments in 2003 to 2004 when we had other series of lunar eclipses? And actually that was when we were in Iraq, wasn't it?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, so, yeah, we were warring, famine's always all over the place. Where was it then? And
there's always a famine in the African continent.
Yeah, or there was another series of lunar eclipses in between 1985 and 1986. Or I think there was 3 others in the 20th century, and there'll be 6 more before the end of this century. That is lunar eclipses. So it looks like we have a lot of the ends of the world to get through, people. So.
Yeah, I'm getting tired of the end. I mean, really.
Yes.
I'm holding my breath, you know, but it doesn't happen.
You know, one of these days, someone might be right. But then again, nobody's going to be around to say, I told you so.
Yeah, but then again, it's probably going to be we ourselves that destroy the doggone Earth and or comet or something like that. I'm sure that it's not going to be anything biblical or religious.
Yeah, but that's the thing with these hazy prophecies throughout the Bible and not only through the Bible, but all sorts of religions. They can be interpreted to mean so many different things, which is the great thing about science is, you know, when Halley stepped up and said, this comet will become this year a plate in this point of the sky and follow this trajectory, there's nothing ambiguous about that.
No, and he said that 76 years later, the comet would return again on this date.
Yeah.
And you can't get much more specific than that.
Yeah, that's...
Oh, but by the way, you know, we all know that Easter just went by there, and I couldn't help but notice how quickly all talk of Jesus and religion sort of went out of the news. I mean, it seemed like people forgot about Jesus and Easter almost overnight. And I noticed that all the stores took Jesus' favorite food, the chocolate-covered marshmallow eggs, out of the grocery stores and everything. So much for Easter. And
actually, there are some Christian websites complaining that Google didn't change their homepage to reflect Easter. They think it's some sort of anti-Christian bigotry. I mean, you know how Google will often change their webpage for different events. But looks like we're coming up on just 1 minute and 30 seconds to go. So a couple of reminders. Our meetups are Lancaster on April 23rd. York on May 3rd at 10 a.m. Then we've got Harrisburg on May 8th, and Lebanon on May 14th, and Chambersburg on May 20th. Our next episode will be on May 13th, same time, and you'll be also able to find us. We now have our YouTube archive up to date, so you can catch our show rebroadcast on YouTube, hopefully within the next 24 to 48 hours.
And that means that, you know, we are available worldwide. Right. Can you imagine that? Worldwide atheism. Oh,
and if you don't want to call into the show, go ahead and just leave us a message on our YouTube channel or Facebook page, and we might just feature your comments. And we also have an email for Ask an Atheist, PAN, which is email at Gmail, and you can leave a question on that, and we won't identify you if you don't want, but you can see it's up on the screen. So thank you very much for watching. Yeah, and we'll see you next time. Yes.